Thanksgiving dinners have a way of revealing truths no one is ready for. But that night, my truth didn't just slip out. It detonated right in the middle of the table. My mother raised her wine glass, smiling the way she always did when she wanted the whole room to admire my younger sister. "Hannah's wedding was amazing," she said loudly, her voice dripping with pride. Then she turned to me. "So, Grace, when's yours?" The laughter that followed wasn't loud. It was worse. It was knowing. It was dismissive. And it was exactly what they expected me to swallow. Again, I set my fork down, not hard, not dramatic, just final. "I already had mine," I said, "months ago, and you all got invitations." Silence. The kind that doesn't just fall over a room, it strangles it. My father blinked confused. "We never received anything, sweetheart." But Hannah didn't blink at all. She just stared at her plate perfectly still, like someone bracing for an earthquake she knew was coming. And she was right, because I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and placed it on the table between the candles and the carved turkey. What I was about to show them, what I discovered, after months of being ignored, was only the beginning. They thought the worst thing I was about to reveal was that my sister had intercepted my wedding invitations. But they had no idea. No idea about the second set of signatures. No idea about the deleted messages. No idea about the envelope someone tried to destroy. And certainly no idea about the real thing I found hidden in my parents' house that would change everything they believed about who my family really was. You'll want to stay for that part. Trust me. And if you're new here, take a second to subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this story or the next ones that might just echo your own life. Sometimes the truth we avoid the longest is the truth that frees us. Now, let me tell you how everything started to fall apart long before that Thanksgiving night. When people talk about childhood, they usually talk about warmth, about family road trips, birthday candles, the smell of apple pie cooling on a kitchen counter. I didn't grow up in a home without those things. They were there, but they were always arranged around Hannah, like furniture positioned to spotlight one person and make everyone else part of the background. I used to think that was normal, that every family had a child who shined and another child who learned to dim themselves so the room didn't feel too crowded. My mother used to say Hannah was born performing, and maybe she was, but I was born too, and somehow that part never seemed to matter. From the time we were little, Hannah collected attention the way other kids collected stickers. She was the dancer, the cheerleader, the girl with glittering trophies that lined the hallway like a shrine. I remember the way Mom polished those trophies every few months, humming as she worked. She said she liked to keep them camera ready. She never did that with the science fair ribbons I won. Those sat in an old shoebox on the top shelf of my closet until I packed them myself years later. Dad wasn't unkind. He just floated through the house, like a man trying not to disturb the already fragile balance. He kept the peace by not acknowledging the cracks, which in its own way made them deeper. As we got older, the distance between Hannah and me wasn't about achievement anymore. It was about attention. Hannah demanded it, and I learned how to survive without it. I became the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who didn't mind waiting. At least, that's what they convinced themselves. But leaving home changes you. And moving to Montana changed me more than I expected. I traded the constant noise of my childhood for the wide open silence of the mountains, for early mornings where the world felt brand new. My work studying water systems and environmental patterns didn't impress the kind of people my mother cared about. But it made sense to me. It mattered in a simple, steady way. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was competing with someone's spotlight. That was also where I met Adam. The first time he came into the small research center where I worked, it was because he needed help understanding a water permit for the hangar he rented. He was patient, soft-spoken, with eyes that looked like he'd seen the worst life could offer, and chose to be kind anyway. He told me later that he noticed I apologized 3 times in the first 10 minutes, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. He said that was how he knew I came from a family where someone taught me to shrink. Adam didn't make me feel small. He made me feel steady, like the ground under me wasn't going to disappear if I stepped too hard. And when I met his daughter, Sophie, 12 years old with a messy ponytail and a laugh that filled a room, something inside me softened. She asked about my work. She remembered the names of the birds I talked about. She drew me a picture once and wrote at the bottom, "Grace is my friend." No one in my childhood home had ever said something like that to me without comparing me to Hannah. Adam's family was the first place I felt seen without needing to earn the right to be noticed. His mother baked me a pie the second time I visited and asked if I preferred tea or coffee. She remembered the answer. His father fixed a loose cabinet handle in my apartment without me asking. Little things, tiny things. Things that to someone who grew up differently might not mean much. But to me, they were everything. One quiet evening near the end of spring, Adam and I were watching the clouds roll across the mountains. He reached for my hand, squeezed it once, and said, "You don't have to prove anything here." And I believed him. Sometimes, healing doesn't come like a storm. Sometimes it comes in pieces, in moments, in the way someone looks at you like you matter even when you're not performing. But rebuilding myself meant something else too. It meant letting go of the belief that my family would magically start seeing me. Still, a part of me, stubborn and fragile, hoped that when something important happened, really important, they'd show up. Not because Hannah wasn't in the spotlight for once, but because I finally was. I didn't know then that the moment I invited them into my new life was the same moment someone in that house decided I didn't deserve one. Planning a wedding was never something I dreamed about. I didn't grow up imagining dresses or centerpieces or walking down an aisle with everyone watching. Maybe because I learned early that whenever I stepped into a spotlight, someone always found a way to switch it off. But planning a small, simple wedding with Adam, that felt different. It felt quiet in the best way, like building a home from the inside out. Instead of decorating a house you weren't invited to live in, we chose a little wooden chapel, tucked between 2 ridges, a place where wind carried pine needles across the porch, and every echo sounded like a blessing. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't meant to be. It was honest. And I wanted the people who mattered to be there, including my family. That's the part that still stings when I think about it. Because I tried. I really did. One Saturday, I sat at our small kitchen table with watercolor pens and thick paper and designed the invitations myself. Warm beige cardstock, dark green lettering, a sketch of the chapel at the top. They felt like us, simple, thoughtful, rooted. I wrote each envelope carefully, making sure nothing could be misread or misdelivered. I remember pausing before addressing the one for my parents. I held the pen just above the paper, thinking, this time they'll see me, they'll show up, not out of obligation, but out of love. I mailed the invitations 3 weeks early. Priority mail. Signature required. I tracked them obsessively, refreshing the page every few hours, like a teenager, waiting for college acceptance letters. One by one, the notifications came in. Delivered. Signed for. Processed. 6 envelopes. 6 confirmations. But not one reply. Not a single call. Not even a casual text saying congratulations. At first, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. People get busy. Mail gets lost. Life intervenes. I told myself all the comforting things daughters tell themselves when they don't want to face the heavier truth. But the silence didn't feel accidental. It felt curated. 3 days after the invitations were delivered, I checked the family group chat we'd had for years. The last message from me, an update about my job, was still there. But I couldn't see the typing indicator anymore. I couldn't see Hannah's new messages. The chat felt frozen. Then something stranger happened. The group disappeared. Not archived. Gone. I stared at my phone for a long time. I closed the app and reopened it. Restarted the phone. Nothing changed. It was like I'd been swept out of the room without anyone having to look me in the eye. I tried calling my mother. Voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail again. When I called my father, he answered, but only for a moment. He said he was on his way out the door and would call me back later. He didn't. I even sent Hannah a message. Something simple. Hey, did you get my mail? No response. But I could see she'd been active online only moments before. The silence didn't just grow, it thickened. One evening when I was washing dishes, Adam leaned against the counter, watching me a little too carefully. He had that look people get when they're afraid to say the thing they're thinking. Finally, he asked Grace, "When was the last time your family reached out to you first? I mean, without you initiating everything." I didn't answer right away. I rinsed the soap off a glass and set it upside down to dry. Then I whispered, "I don't know." It came out smaller than I meant it to. Adam dried his hands on a towel, stepped closer, and touched my arm. "Maybe we should check the tracking logs again," he said gently. "Just to be sure." I nodded, though a knot had already formed in my stomach. Part fear, part recognition. Part of me already knew something was wrong. We sat on the couch, with my laptop open between us, the room lit only by a lamp in the corner. Adam typed in the tracking numbers. The data loaded slowly, like a truth reluctant to come forward. Signatures, times, confirmation stamps, and then something that made my breath catch in my throat. 3 of the signatures. 3 of them looked familiar, curved, confident. A looping style I'd seen on decades of birthday cards and school permission slips. It looked like Hannah's handwriting. Not identical, but close enough that my heart recognized it before my mind dared to. Adam didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just looked at me with that steady, careful gaze he had, the one that said he wouldn't let me face this alone. But even then, I tried to explain it away. "Maybe she just signed because she was closest to the door," I whispered. "Maybe it was convenient. Maybe—" Adam shook his head softly. "Maybe," he said, "but maybe not." His voice wasn't accusing. It was protective. A part of me wanted to believe the best. A bigger part feared the worst, because deep down, even before I saw the signatures, I could feel something shifting, something deliberate, something hidden. And for the first time, I wondered if someone in that house had decided my wedding wasn't worth showing up for because it wasn't hers. The morning of the wedding arrived, the way good things often do, quietly, without fanfare. A soft fog curled over the mountains like a blanket, and the chapel seemed to rise out of it as if the world had built it specifically for us. It was the kind of morning poets try to describe and never quite can. Inside, candles flickered along the aisle. Adam stood near the front, adjusting his tie, the way he always did when he was nervous, tugging it just a little too tight, before remembering to breathe. Sophie held a small bouquet of wildflowers. She'd picked herself proud and glowing, even though she tried to hide it. I should have been thinking about vows about the future, about the weight of the moment. But a part of me kept glancing at the door, not anxiously, not desperately, just hopefully. Hope is strange that way. It survives long after experience tells it not to. A few of our friends arrived. Co-workers, neighbors, Adam's family, warm, buzzing present. His mother hugged me so tightly, I lost my breath for a moment. "You look beautiful," she said. In the way she said it, soft but certain, felt like a blessing no minister could give. When the ceremony started, the truth was impossible to ignore. The pew reserved for my family sat empty. Not one car in the gravel lot belonged to them. Not one familiar face emerged through the fog. I stood there holding Adam's hands, looking into eyes that steadied me, and told myself it didn't matter, that the people who were here were enough, that love didn't require an audience. But when the minister asked who gave this woman to be married, and Adam's father said, "We do something," inside me cracked a quiet private break I tried hard not to let anyone hear. The ceremony was beautiful. Our vows were simple, honest, a little messy, in the way real love always is. Adam cried first. I cried second. Sophie cried, even though she pretended she wasn't. We laughed with the few guests who came. We cut a cake too small for tradition, but perfect for us. We danced under string lights someone from Adam's hangar had helped hang earlier that morning. And yet, in every bright moment, there was a shadow of absence. A shape where my family should have been. After the reception, when the last guests left and the lights were dimmed, I walked outside and stood alone for a minute. The air smelled like pine and fresh earth. The mountains were dark silhouettes against a deepening sky. Adam joined me quietly. He didn't ask the question people ask brides who stand by themselves after their weddings. He didn't ask if I was okay. He simply took my hand, as if saying, "You don't have to explain what hurts." But something inside me did want to explain. Not because I needed him to fix it, he couldn't, but because giving voice to a hurt sometimes shrinks it a little. "I really thought they'd come," I whispered. Even saying it out loud embarrassed me, like I was admitting I'd believed in something foolish. Adam squeezed my hand gently. "They should have been here," he said. "Anyone who loves you should have been here." The simplicity of that truth was almost unbearable. That night, after we got home, I checked my phone again. Still nothing. No missed calls, no messages, no congratulations, not even a mistake dial. I refreshed my email inbox. Empty. I opened the family group chat again and saw something I hadn't noticed before. Not only was it gone, but the history of it had vanished too. It was as if someone had erased the place where my voice once existed. A sick feeling crept into my stomach. It wasn't the hurt of being forgotten. It was the hurt of being intentionally removed. I tried to tell myself it was a glitch. Apps do strange things. Phones misbehave. Technology isn't perfect, but the timing, the silence, the disappearing chat, and the signatures Adam and I saw, nothing was random anymore. A few days later, Sophie found me at the kitchen table staring at my phone like it had betrayed me. She pulled up a chair, her small voice cutting through the quiet. "Doesn't your family like weddings?" she asked. It wasn't a cruel question. It wasn't even meant to be deep. She was 12. She just wanted to understand. And I didn't know what to say. Not without telling her a truth I wasn't ready to say out loud. So I smiled gently and told her, "Sometimes people don't show up the way we hope." She nodded slowly, thinking it over, then leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad you have us," she whispered. It was the kind of comfort that shouldn't have had to come from a child. That night, when I lay in bed next to Adam, unable to sleep, I realized something that made my breath catch. The silence from my family wasn't an accident. It wasn't ignorance. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was a choice. And the scariest part wasn't that someone had hidden my wedding from them. It was the haunting possibility that someone had hidden it because they wanted to. Suspicion doesn't arrive like thunder. It comes quietly, the way fog slips across a field. Slow at first, then suddenly, you realize you can't see anything clearly anymore. For a few days after the wedding, I tried to push the uneasy thoughts aside. I cleaned the house. I organized the leftover decorations. I answered emails from coworkers congratulating me. On the outside, everything looked normal, but the silence from my family kept growing louder and louder until it felt impossible to ignore. One evening, Adam found me at the kitchen table with my laptop open. I hadn't meant to stay up late, but I'd been staring at the wedding tracking information again, 6 deliveries, 6 signatures, reading them like a person reading their own autopsy. Adam pulled out the chair beside me, not asking what I was doing. He already knew. "Grace," he said softly, "how many times have you looked at these?" "I don't know," I answered. "Too many, probably." He exhaled slowly, folding his hands in front of him. "Then, let's stop guessing. Let's look deeper." There wasn't judgment in his voice, just concern, just care. We typed the tracking numbers again. Every envelope showed delivered. Signature obtained. I clicked the first one. Same looping signature we'd seen before. Curved, familiar strokes. Too similar to Hannah's handwriting for coincidence. I clicked the second. Same curve, same angle, same confident loop. By the third signature, my hands felt cold. "Couldn't this just be the postal worker?" I whispered. "Sometimes they sign for people, right?" Adam looked at the name more carefully. "No postal worker signs with a first name like that," he said quietly. "And never 3 times in a row." I knew he was right. My heart knew before my mind did. But I still wasn't ready to believe that Hannah, my own sister, would intercept something as sacred as a wedding invitation. So I tried another angle. I emailed my aunt, the one who always checked her mailbox carefully, because she was afraid of misplacing bills. Her reply came an hour later. "Sweetheart, I never received anything from you. Are you sure you mailed something?" I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I asked if she could send me a picture of her mailbox inside, just in case something got stuck. She was confused, but agreed. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A single photo. Inside her mailbox, at the bottom, under a grocery flyer, in an envelope addressed to a neighbor, was a torn corner of beige cardstock, the same shade as my invitations. The corner had part of my handwriting on it. A chill ran through me. I called her immediately. "Aunt May, can you reach down and see what that is?" I could hear her moving things. Then she gasped. "Oh, honey, this was yours." She sent another photo. My envelope ripped, bent the top, torn open. The chapel sketch was still visible. "Did this come like this?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. "I check my mail every morning. That wasn't there yesterday. Someone must have opened it and shoved it back." Someone. But who? It didn't make sense. Why would anyone bother to tear open an invitation meant for my aunt? Why not just let her receive it? What were they afraid she'd see? The thought sank, sharp, and deep. Someone wasn't just ignoring my wedding. Someone was actively making sure no one else saw it either. That's when Adam suggested checking the shared family email. My family used an old Gmail account for group updates, receipts, travel plans, reminders. Mom insisted everyone have the password for convenience. But over the years, Hannah was the one who checked it most. She paid their bills online. She handled their appointments. She filtered spam. Adam helped me access the activity log. It showed who opened what and when. There it was, my email announcement sent a week before the invitations. Opened from the family's home IP address. Opened on a device tagged H-phone, Hannah's. The timestamp was midnight. 12 minutes later, the email was deleted. Not archived, not marked as read, deleted. My breath tightened. I felt Adam watching me, searching my face, making sure I was still grounded in something real. But I wasn't sure anymore. Then came the part that made my stomach drop. 3 days after my invitation, tracking showed delivered. Signed, the group chat I'd been part of for years was deleted. Not by accident. The log showed the action was performed by a device with the same initials. I stared at the screen. My mind felt like it was trying to step out of itself. "Grace," Adam whispered. "This wasn't a mistake." I closed the laptop slowly. Like shutting, it might make the truth disappear. But truth doesn't disappear. Not when it's been stitched into every silence you've ever endured. Someone in my parents' house had seen my invitations, handled them, signed for them, opened my emails, deleted my messages, torn open the envelope meant for my aunt. And someone who had always wanted the spotlight, someone who knew how to control every narrative, someone who never liked sharing attention, had made sure wedding invitations with my name all on them never reached the people who loved me. I knew who that person was. I just didn't know yet how far she had gone or why my wedding threatened her so deeply. But I was about to find out. Thanksgiving at my parents' house always looked like a magazine spread. The kind of holiday scene people post on social media, so strangers will think everything in their world is tidy and warm. A perfect table, a perfect menu, a perfect family. At least that's the story they like to tell. But when I stepped through the door that night, something in the air felt off thicker, heavier, like a storm building behind the walls. I felt it settle over my shoulders, the way I used to feel it as a child, whenever someone mentioned Hannah's name in a tone too sweet to be real. My mother moved through the kitchen, narrating every detail of Hannah's September wedding, as if she were reading from a script she'd rehearsed for weeks. My father opened another bottle of wine, already looking tired. Hannah and her husband stood by the fireplace, posing for photos, her fixing her hair, him adjusting her dress like they were trying out for next year's holiday card. No one asked how I was. No one mentioned the wedding they didn't attend. No one looked at me long enough to see anything at all. I took my seat across from Hannah. She didn't meet my eyes. She busied herself with her napkin, her fork, her water glass, a performance of innocence, down to the smallest gesture. Dinner started with predictable praise. Her dress, her venue, the flower arrangements, the cake. Alex's cousin flew in from California. Everyone chimed in with admiration, like it was a chorus they'd practiced. I listened quietly. I'd spent my whole life listening quietly. And then, as if the room were waiting for the moment she would cue, my mother lifted her glass. She clinked it lightly, smiling wide enough to show every tooth. "Hannah's wedding was wonderful," she announced, turning just slightly so the candlelight caught her face. "Truly perfect." Then she pivoted her gaze to me. "So, Grace, When's your wedding? The table chuckled. A soft, knowing ripple of laughter. Even my father paused mid-cut of the turkey, waiting to see how I'd take the hit this year. My throat didn't tighten. My hands didn't shake. For the first time in my life, I felt steady. I placed my fork down gently. I already had mine, I said. Months ago. The laughter stopped, instantly cut off, as if someone had pulled the plug on the room's power. My mother's smile froze in place, cracking at the edges. My father leaned forward. What do you mean, sweetheart? We never got an invitation. Hannah kept her eyes glued to her plate. Too still, too precise, like someone trying not to move during a lie detector test. I breathed once, slow and measured. You did get invitations, I said. All of you did. Silence. The heavy, suffocating kind. Then I reached into my bag. Not fast, not dramatic, just deliberate. I set my phone on the scene. Its screen lit up between the plates and candles like a spotlight aimed at the truth. What is that? My mother stammered. Proof, I said quietly. I opened the first screenshot. Tracking information. Delivery dates, signatures. I rotated the phone so the entire table could see. The signature at the bottom, a looping, confident name, was unmistakable, even if no one wanted to acknowledge it. My father squinted, leaning closer. Hannah, that looks like your signature. Hannah finally looked up. Her voice cracked, just barely. I sign for things all the time. Packages, returns, deliveries. That doesn't mean anything. I nodded slowly. That's why I brought more than one screenshot. I swiped. Another signature. Hers. Same loops, same tails, same handwriting she'd practiced for years to make it look elegant. A murmur went through the table. Hannah's husband shifted uncomfortably. My mother shook her head so hard, the curls around her face trembled. No, this is some kind of mix-up, she insisted. Hannah would never hide your invitations. That's absurd. I felt something settle inside me. Not anger, just clarity. I used to believe that, I said softly, until I checked the logs. I pulled up the next screenshot, the family email account access history. The wedding announcement I sent in April, I said, was opened from this house at 12:03 a.m. I tapped the screen, and it was deleted 12 minutes later from a device ID labeled H-phone. The room was silent enough to hear the heater hum. Hannah's face tightened. I don't know what that means, she said sharply. I get so many notifications. It could have been anything. I didn't respond. I didn't accuse. I simply swiped to the final photo. This, I said, is the envelope you ripped open. The torn beige corner, the chapel sketch, the handwriting, the crease. But the part that made her eyes widen, the part that tightened her jaw, was the small scrap caught inside the tear. A sliver of Hannah's manicure appointment reminder. Her name, her date, her salon caught where she hadn't meant to leave it. My mother gasped. Her husband went pale. My father's eyes filled with something like grief or guilt. Hannah swallowed hard. That doesn't prove anything, she whispered. It proves enough, I said. And I'm not finished, because what Hannah didn't know, what no one at that table knew yet, was that the torn envelope wasn't the only thing I'd discovered. There was something else, something still hidden, something waiting upstairs in a room none of them had entered yet tonight. And before this dinner ended, they would all learn what it was. When the last screenshot faded from the phone screen, the room stayed frozen in a strange, breathless quiet. No one reached for their wine. No one asked to pass the potatoes. No one pretended everything was normal anymore. For the first time in my life, my family was truly looking at me. Not as Hannah's sister, not as the quiet background character in their perfect little story, but as someone they didn't understand, someone they'd underestimated for far too long. My father cleared his throat. Grace, Sweetheart, there must be a reasonable explanation. I nodded. I agree, which is why I spent months trying to find one. I tapped my phone again. A new image appeared. This, I said, is the envelope my aunt found in her mailbox. Torn, crushed, jammed beneath a grocery flyer. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. But that wasn't from us. We don't even live near her. I nodded again, and I thought the same thing, until I checked the timestamp on when her mail was delivered. It arrived before they drove to your house for the weekend back in June. My father looked confused. Why would someone take her letter? That doesn't make sense. I studied Hannah. She didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't breathe, because she already knew. Hannah, I said quietly, did you visit Aunt May's house last June? You helped her set up her backyard for the barbecue, didn't you? Her jaw tightened. A lot of people were there. Yes, I said. But only one of them stayed behind, long enough to intercept a delivery. Her husband, Jason, turned toward her slowly. Hannah, what is she talking about? And that was when she cracked. Not dramatically, not with a sob or an admission. Just one tiny movement, her fingers tightening around her napkin, until the embroidered leaf twisted. That doesn't prove anything, she said, her voice thinner than before. I handle everyone's mail. Everyone knows that. My mother jumped in immediately. Hannah is responsible, organized. She helps the whole family. She would never sabotage your wedding. I almost smiled. Of course she would say that. I used to think that too, I said softly, until I found the last piece. I reached into my bag again. This time, I pulled out a small folded paper. Not torn, not crushed, just old and creased from being held too many times. My father leaned closer. What is that? I unfolded it. This, I said, is the note I found in the guest room upstairs, the room Hannah stayed in last spring. Their faces went pale, all three of them. My mother whispered, Grace, no, that's private. I lifted the paper gently. It's a list, I said. A list of all the things Hannah wanted to manage before her wedding, including one line that says, I glanced at Hannah. Her eyes burned with panic. Make sure G's event doesn't interfere. The room erupted all at once. That's ridiculous. It's not what it looks like. It must be notes for something else. Hannah would never, but Hannah's husband Jason wasn't speaking. He was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. Hannah, he said slowly, why would you write that? She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again, no sound coming out. Her eyes darted between all of us, searching for an escape. A script, a way to twist the narrative like she always had. Finally, she snapped. Because nothing is ever about me, unless I make it about me, she shouted. The confession hit the table like a dropped dish. My mother gasped. My father bowed his head. Jason leaned back, stunned. Hannah kept going, her voice rising with years of unspoken jealousy. You have no idea what it's like, she cried. To work my entire life, to be perfect, to be admired, to get everything right, and then suddenly she pointed at me trembling. You meet someone, you disappear to Montana, you live quietly, and people adore you without you even trying. I stared at her stunned. You think people adore me? I whispered. Yes, she snapped. Adam's family, his daughter, those people at your little mountain research center. Everyone treats you like you're some gentle little miracle. Her voice broke. And I'm just noise. The truth hung there, raw, ugly, undeniable. She hadn't sabotaged my wedding because it stole attention from hers. She sabotaged it because she couldn't stand that someone loved me, that a family chose me without her being the center of it. My father rubbed his forehead, trembling. Hannah, how could you do this to your sister? Tears streamed down her face, but she wasn't crying for me. She was crying for the version of herself she could no longer defend. "I didn't mean to ruin anything," she whispered. "It just got out of hand." I nodded slowly. Most cruelty does. Then I looked at both my parents. "And you let it happen," I said. Because it was easier to believe I didn't matter than to ask why I kept disappearing. No one argued. No one defended themselves. They couldn't anymore. The truth had finally spoken louder than Hannah ever could. The room felt smaller after that, like the walls had pulled closer, listening, waiting, refusing to let anyone escape, the truth now leaking into every corner. My mother lifted a shaking hand to her forehead. This is all too much," she whispered. Her voice trembled, not from heartbreak, but from the collapse of the story she'd spent years protecting. My father rose from his chair slowly, as if the weight of every missed moment finally pressed down on him. He looked at me with eyes I hadn't seen since I was a child, sad, uncertain, full of something dangerously close to regret. "Grace," he said quietly, "we didn't know. If we had, you would have come," I finished for him. "Would you? After all the birthdays, the graduations, the recitals, you forgot. After every moment, you turned into a footnote. Because Hannah had something brighter to say." He opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't have an answer. And maybe, for the first time in his life, he understood that silence wasn't neutral. It was an agreement. My mother tried next. "Grace, let's not turn this into something bigger. We can fix this." "No," I said calmly. "You can't fix what you refuse to acknowledge." I stood slowly. The chair scraped softly against the hardwood floor. Not loud, just enough to draw every eye to me. Hannah breathed unevenly. Mascara smudged beneath her eyes. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. But even then, even broken, she reached for the only weapon she had left. "Grace," she whispered, "please don't go." I looked at her. Rather, I looked at all of them. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the dimmed sibling. I wasn't the afterthought. I wasn't the quiet, patient, invisible daughter. I was a woman who had built a life without their permission, a life they never bothered to see. And I wasn't going to shrink back down so they could feel more comfortable. "I'm done," I said softly. Not harsh, not angry, just finished. My father stepped forward, desperate. "Grace, we're talking," I said. "For the first time, we're actually talking. But this moment doesn't erase everything that came before." My mother's voice cracked. "We love you." I nodded gently. "I believe you. But love without action looks a lot like neglect." Silence swallowed the room again. I reached for my coat, draped over the back of my chair. I slid my arms through the sleeves, feeling the weight of it settle onto my shoulders like something familiar, something protective. I turned toward the front door. My steps sounded steady, certain, not rushed, not shaken, just true. Behind me, I heard soft sobs. I heard my mother whispering my name like a prayer she'd never learned how to say out loud. I heard my father mutter something about checking the mail, as if the magnitude of what had happened finally broke through the fog he'd lived in for years. And then a sound I didn't expect. Footsteps. My father. "Grace," he said from behind me, breath uneven. "There's something you need to see." He held out a small, dusted envelope. The beige cardstock was unmistakable. My handwriting stared back at me like a ghost from a life that never reached them. "I found this in the garage," he said, tucked behind the painting supplies, still sealed. The world tilted for a moment. My original invitation to my parents. Untouched, hidden, but not lost. Someone had placed it there deliberately, out of sight, out of reach. My chest tightened, but not with surprise. I already knew, but seeing it, feeling its weight in my hands, gave the truth a shape I could no longer deny. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded, but his eyes glistened. "Grace, I'm sorry. I should have asked questions. I should have been better." I gently closed his hand around nothingness, because there was nothing left for him to hold. "I hope one day," I said, "you understand that showing up is a choice." Then I opened the front door. Cold November air rushed inside, wrapping around me like freedom, like clarity, like something long overdue. As I stepped outside, I heard no footsteps behind me. No one followed, and somehow, that told me everything I needed to know. Adam was waiting in the tire. The moment I slid into the seat, he didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. He simply took my hand. "You're home," he whispered. For the first time, I believed him. I looked out the window at the house I grew up in, the house that shaped me, silenced me, forgot me, and realized something that made my breath ease for the first time all night. Family isn't defined by who you're born to. It's defined by who refuses to let you disappear. And I was finally walking toward mine. The morning after Thanksgiving, sunlight spilled through our kitchen window, soft and pale, the way winter light always is. Adam brewed coffee, while Sophie flipped pancakes shaped like uneven hearts. The house smelled warm, like cinnamon and safety, and a life I chose for myself. My phone buzzed only once that day. A long email from Hannah. Pages of carefully crafted apologies, woven with therapy phrases she must have rehearsed in front of a mirror. Words like accountability and personal growth and emotional complexity. I read every line and then closed it. Some apologies aren't meant to be answered. Some wounds don't require reopening just to prove they've healed. My father called that afternoon. Not dramatic, not heavy, just slow, careful, like a man learning how to speak a language he should have known decades ago. He asked if he could try not to fix the past, but to do better moving forward. I didn't promise him anything. Healing isn't a contract. It's a boundary. But I let him try. My mother never reached out. And strangely, that silence no longer felt like abandonment. It felt like clarity. When someone stops pretending the truth, finally stands on its own feet. A few days later, Adam's parents invited us over for dinner. Nothing fancy. Just warm plates, real conversation, and the kind of attention that doesn't have to be earned. Helen squeezed my hand, the same way she did the first time I met her, and said, "You're family here. Not because of a wedding, because you matter." And for the first time, those words didn't hurt. They fit. Standing in the doorway that night, watching snow drift lazily across the yard, I realized something I had spent years too afraid to name. You don't lose a family by telling the truth. You lose the illusion of one. And what grows in that empty space, the friendships, the laughter, the quiet mornings, with people who choose you, that is where real family lives. If any part of my story echoed something in your life, you're not alone. Tell me where you're watching from. Share your story. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is step away from the people who never learned how to hold us and walk toward the ones who always will.